Hello. Good evening, everyone. We are so grateful that you're here and joining us for our part two of Cancer in Your Community, a review of cancer in the Black community. We invite everyone, if you are watching on YouTube or on Twitter, to invite a friend or share the video if you're watching it as a recap. A little bit about this event in particular is that the MGH Cancer Center had an equity event collaborated with the Black Market in Nubian Square on October 14th to host the first part of this event. And we found it very useful and helpful, and we wanted to follow up with a part two. I am joined by some lovely providers at Mass General, where I work, and also with other community members and leaders that you will soon be able to meet. I would like to say that the event was pretty amazing, but we would also want you to see it as a visual to have a quick recap as we are live now, but the event was in person, but now this event is a live stream. So we're going to bring you to a quick video of what happened on October 14th. And we again thank the Black Market for their collaboration, and we look forward to other future collaborations with other community organizations in Boston. I don't think I introduced myself because I'm so excited. My name is Brenda Lormill. I am the equity nurse practitioner at the Massachusetts General Hospital Cancer Center, and I am so happy to be here. So first, let's give you a live view of what actually happened on October 14th. All right, so there's one thing is that anything visual is actually better with music, and I do apologize that you guys could not hear the wonderful music, but you saw what was happening on October 14th. So I actually want to bring back some of those amazing speakers, clinicians, all from Mass General Cancer Center, that are going to come up and just tell you about a little bit about who they are and about their specific diseases that they treat. So Rick Lee, Dr. Rick Lee, Dr. Bev Moy, and Dr. Alicia Sequist. Welcome.
Hi, thanks so much. Maybe I'll start. My name is Rick Lee. I'm a genitourinary medical oncologist, which means I take care of prostate cancer, kidney, bladder, and testicular cancers. I'm the clinical director of the genitourinary medical oncology group.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beverly Moy. I'm a medical oncologist that specializes in breast cancer, and I'm the clinical director of the team. I'm so glad to be back.
And I'm Alicia Sequist. I specialize in treating patients with lung cancer, and it's great to be with everybody again.
Awesome. Thank you guys for coming back and joining us. I think we're just going to start off with Rick. Go ahead and give us an overview of cancer in the Black community in Boston.
Excellent. So we have a couple of slides that will show. I think it's important for us to understand, in a lot of ways we think about cancer and we can give you statistics and it all seems very abstract. So I thought that perhaps it'd be instructive for us to look at cancer in Massachusetts and then in Boston in particular. So can we pull up the slides, please? There we go. So next slide. And I think what you can see here is that in the blue bars, that these are male patients, and then the red bars, it's female. And these are cancer incidence rates in Massachusetts. Now, this is older data that was compiled quite a long time ago. But I think what's important to understand here is that when you look at the second grouping, those are the patients who are Black or have identified as Black or African American in this specific study. And what you can see there is that the male Massachusetts residents, that the cancer incidence is higher in Black male residents in Massachusetts. And you can see there that the Black women also have reasonably high incidence, perhaps a little bit lower than the white Massachusetts residents. Next slide, please. If we then focus in on Boston specifically, then you can see a slightly different story. And this comes from the Boston Public Health Commission. These are data that were last updated in 2015. So again, a little bit older. But I think what you can see there in the top left corner, those are the year-over-year cancer mortality rates. Now, these are Bostonians who died of cancer. And there you can see that the orange bar includes the Black Bostonians. And because it's pretty much at the top of all of those graphs, I think you can appreciate that indicates that Black Bostonians have a higher cancer mortality rate than all the other groups, white, Asian, Latinx. And so I think then at the bottom left corner is the mortality from 2015 by sex. And the other piece that you can tell here again is that the orange bar, which indicates Black Bostonians, is higher than all of the other bars. And this is an indicator that cancer-specific mortality is highest in Black Bostonians. Now on the right, there's a table that describes the leading causes of cancer-related death in Black Bostonians. And here what you can see is that that they shift a little bit from year to year. This includes 2011 through 2015. On the top is lung cancer. You can see that prostate, breast, and colon cancer occupy prominent spots in spots 2 through 5. And that's very, very important for us because these are screenable malignancies. And what you're going to hear from each of our speakers tonight is a short description of each one of these cancers and how we might be able to do a little bit better. But if these are screenable malignancies, these are cancers that we hopefully can identify earlier when they're in a curable stage. And so hopefully this trend won't continue. Next slide, please. here are a couple of different screening tests, the mammogram on the left, in the middle, the Pap test for cervical cancer, and then in the middle, and then in the far right is sigmoidoscopy or colonoscopy to identify colon and rectal cancers. And what you can see here is the breakdown among the different ethnicities among Bostonians. While for breast cancer or for mammograms, Black patients or Black women in Boston actually screen at a comparably high rate to other ethnic groups. There's a slightly lower rate of Pap smear testing, but a pretty similar rate of colon cancer screening. So screening hopefully will remain high among all of the different groups that we have. Next slide, please. One major challenge that we face, though, during COVID is the way that the pandemic has disproportionately hit, certainly, in terms of health and wealth equity, it certainly disproportionately hit certain groups in our community as well as across the country, primarily patients or folks who are Black and brown. This is a study that looked at delays in breast and cervical cancer screening. And in this one study on the right in Washington State, I think what you can see there in the bar that I've circled in orange is that Black women had lower rates of breast cancer screening compared to white women. And that holds true with all the other ethnic groups as well. So the biggest challenge then that we face with COVID is catching back up to the screening rates that we had before. And hopefully we won't see a great disparity in terms of cancer diagnoses and cancer treatment. So I just wanted to give that overview of cancer in Massachusetts and cancer in Boston specifically. Next, I think I'll talk a little bit about prostate cancer. So the next slide, please. And I think what's important for us all to recognize is that prostate cancer rates are higher in Black and African American men. They have rates that are 1.6-fold the rates of white Americans. So what you can see in this graph that's at the top is in the green bar. Those are the Black patients diagnosed with prostate cancer. In the red bars down below, the Black patients with prostate cancer actually die at a higher rate, 2.2-fold that of white prostate cancer patients. So prostate cancer is more deadly in Black and African American patients. Next click, please. So the questions then we have are, could it be a different biology between Black patients and white patients? And the next click, please, is that there have been a number of studies that have tried to identify different genes or different ways in which the biology between white compared with Black patients might differ, but these have not been overly conclusive. Next click. So is it a different response to therapy? The answer there appears to be no. Next click. There have been a couple of different studies that have been published recently that have looked at treatments for more advanced prostate cancers, things like sipuleucel T, also known as Provenge, abiraterone or Zytiga, and enzalutamide. In each one of these is actually shown that the Black patients enrolled in the studies fared comparably well to the white patients. So it's not clearly a different response to therapy. Next click, please. So the last question is it access to care? And I would say that is definitely a major factor here. So I'm going to just describe one last study, then I'm going to turn it over. Next click, please. And in studies that have looked at diagnosed prostate cancer, stage for stage, the patients who are Black, and there's the left column that's been circled, compared to the patients who are white, have higher disease volume when diagnosed. So I think that this is an indicator, perhaps, that the Black men are being diagnosed with higher volume disease at the time of diagnosis. Next click. In a study that looked at white compared with Black veterans in the VA system, however, identified 60,000 prostate cancer cases. And actually they saw that the Black vets had statistically significant differences in terms of income, high school graduation rate, lower age, and higher PSA. All these features that would have argued that perhaps those patients, those Black vets, were going to do worse than the white veterans. But in fact, when you look at on the table on the right, the Black veterans actually did better. In this case, they had a lower incidence of death from prostate cancer better overall survival, and lower percentage that had metastatic disease at presentation. So in a closed system where everyone gets equal access to care, that patients who are Black compared to patients who are white seemed to do comparably well. So I think this is a major access issue, and that's what we aim to correct. What I'd like to do next is just introduce my colleague from FEN. It's Dr. Keith Crawford, and he is an advocate and an ally in this journey for Black prostate cancer patients in Boston and throughout the country. Dr. Crawford.
Rick, thanks. Thanks for the introduction. I wanted to also thank Mass General, because you take the lead in stepping into the community and meeting people on their stage. So to talk about FEN, FEN is an organization that was founded by a prostate cancer survivor who is from the Boston area. And we're right down there in Quincy at this time. He is a 21-year cancer survivor, prostate cancer survivor. And the organization FEN is about 18 years old. So it was established when Tom Farrington, that is our president and chief executive officer of FEN, couldn't really understand or didn't have a lot of information. So he took us several months out to learn about prostate cancer. And our program right now is based upon prostate cancer being a disease that's in a continuum. The disease is in a continuum, the treatment is in a continuum. So what else has to be in a continuum? That's advocacy and education. And then that's what we do. And what we've done is created a portfolio of ways to interact with people in the community. So let me be clear. FEN was founded by an African-American prostate cancer patient. But one thing that FEN does, there's two things that we do. One, our objective is that gap, that disparity that exists in care. Our objective is to close that. But it's also our objective to make tools that are available for all men, all Bostonians, all Americans, anybody in the globe, to help them along their prostate cancer journey. So something that was said earlier, and that was die at a higher rate, diagnosed at a higher rate. But one thing we do know is this, the CDC, not the Google doctor, the CDC clearly states, if you detect disease early and it's localized, not only do you have 100% 5-year survival, but over 90% 10-year survival. So what does that say? Early detection. Well, how do you detect it early? That means you have to screen early. And once you screen, that's the next step. So we kind of look at it like slapping the puck down the ice. You screen, and don't be afraid, because in the past, there was this one problem. You have cancer and you think the next day, 6 months later, you got 6 months to live. Then that's not the case. We have institutions like MGH that have researchers that are working day and night. And I was a graduate student here, so I know about the night aspect of it, that are looking to create the next generation treatments for everyone. So the community and Bostonians need to be proud of that. And you need to be proud of the fact that they are coming into the community. So what we do, we have tools that are online, not an app that you have to pull down and put all your patient information in, but a tool that's available on your smartphone. And if you don't have a smartphone, you have a telephone. So that means you can call us to get help. So it's an early detection screening program called FEN PSA. Now we keep everything simple. FEN, PHEN in the front, and PSA in the back.com. Now, once you receive your diagnosis, well, what about treatment? Now, people are wanting you to go in and have a discussion with the doctor. How do you have a discussion with a person who has almost 30 years experience in this field? You can, by providing the patient the tools to understand and communicate what their needs are to the clinician. So we created a tool called FEN Path. What did I say before? We keep it simple. PHEN, path, okay, .com. Now, but all of a sudden, when you look at that tool, you'll find something very interesting. And that is clinical trials. They're a treatment option? Yes, they're a treatment option. And what do you think about clinical trials? And what people don't recognize is this. It's not about Tuskegee. It's about, from the people that we've queried, the surveys that we've gone out, we found out this. One, they're worried more about their life. Two, about how they can impact and benefit their family. And three, how they impact their society. And the Tuskegee study had little or no impact on what they want to do with their life. So that's important. So clinical trials are there. So I want to close out with this one last, 2 points. And one, when we talk about the clinical trials, you have to think about it from the perspective of cutting edge technology, especially in the Boston area. That's going to be some cutting edge technology. It's more of a concierge-like medicine. Concierge. So you're going to get the best quality medicine in clinical trials. That doesn't mean that it's a negative, but you're going to have more people looking at you, trying to help you and help guide you through your prostate cancer journey. And lastly, it's basically no cost or supplemental cost from your insurance company, but the bulk of the cost is covered by the clinical trial. And lastly, we have one other program, and that program is important because we recognize that sometimes it's easier for people to just sit down and relax and look at comedy and entertainment. So what we've done, originally we created a stage play that toured the United States. And it talked about a father, a Black man, single, who's raising 3 sons. And he had to tell them they had prostate cancer. And so we went from the stage, we get hit with COVID, but like Bostonians do, we just keep rolling. And so we rolled from the stage play to creating something like FinFlix. So if they come after me, I'm sorry, but that was the weak joke that I had. So we have episodes that take everyone through a journey of this Black man who was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Are we talking about clinical trials? Are we talking about these new cutting edge technologies? And just all the touch points, all the concerns that people have, that episode talks about. And I ask people to join us, daddysboys.org, and give us your feedback. And what we're trying to do, and it's very important, is we want to reach 1 million people. And we're right about close to 800,000 now. So maybe if you join in with us, and maybe you can push us over the top. So thank you. Thank you, Lee, Dr. Lee. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mass General. Thank you, Bostonians.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crawford. We appreciate you being here with us. All right, we're going to shift gears right into Dr. Moy, who's going to tell us a little bit about breast cancer in the Boston community.
So I'm so glad to talk to you all today about breast cancer. I think that what's really important, if we take a step back, we have to, if you look at the United States, hey, Brenda, do you mind muting? Thanks. So if you look at breast cancer in the United States, as far as how women do in terms of whether they'll survive their breast cancer, the fact is, if you're Black and you're diagnosed with breast cancer, you are about 1.5 times more likely than white women to die of your disease. Focusing on Boston, and we'll bring up some of the data on the slide, Dr. Lee already mentioned that women are actually getting their screening mammographies that is looking to see about diagnosing the breast cancer earlier. Black women are doing just as well as white women in terms of mammography screening. At least they were prior to the COVID pandemic. However, what we stubbornly see is that Black women are still dying at higher rates than white women in Boston if they have breast cancer. So why might that be? If they're getting mammographic screening at the same time and doing that early detection, which is so important to improve the chances of cure, why are Black women still dying at higher rates than white women in Boston? Well, there are many reasons, but several of them we will talk about today. One certainly is that oftentimes Black women have reduced access to timely quality cancer care. So there might be insurance barriers or insurance issues. So a woman gets diagnosed, but they might have difficulty getting in to see an oncology specialist. And we do know that in breast cancer, if you aren't treated in a timely manner, you're more likely to die of the disease. The second reason is that oftentimes women who are Black who have breast cancer have a more aggressive form of breast cancer called triple negative breast cancer. That's a little bit harder to treat, although we cure them all the time and there's a lot of hope there, but that could certainly be a contributing factor. Thirdly, as we heard from Dr. Crawford earlier, clinical trials are so important in giving people the best cancer outcome often. And women who are Black and diagnosed with breast cancer in Boston do have reduced access to clinical trials, which is something that we really need to fix. We have to have women want to seek out these opportunities, and we have to be able to provide them wherever they receive their care or make sure that they have access to a place that is doing these trials. And then finally, there are many groups of women, but certainly Black women have more barriers to treatment sometimes. So when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, you have to undergo a lot of treatment appointments. They might include surgery, daily radiation for several weeks, sometimes chemotherapy, sometimes you have to have scans, you have to be checked up on those anti-estrogen treatments sometimes, and all of that requires time off work, childcare, transportation. And if you have a lot of other competing issues, sometimes the cancer doesn't seem so important. So those are things that we all have to remedy. But finally, what I really want to address is sometimes there's a lot of fear. We heard Dr. Crawford mention earlier, if you're diagnosed with cancer, that is not necessarily a death sentence. And that is especially true of breast cancer. We are curing breast cancer all the time. And even if we're not curing it, women are living many, many, many years with metastatic breast cancer because their treatment has gotten so much better. So there's a lot of reason to hope. And if a woman is diagnosed, we want to be able to make sure that that woman gets the care they need so that they can live a long and happy and healthy life. So these are the kinds of things that we want to do because frankly, at the Mass General Cancer Center, we care deeply about Boston. This is where we are. This is where we live. And being out at Nubian Square was such a special night on October 14th. We were so glad to be there. We look forward to coming back and doing more outreach events. But first, before I go, I really want to introduce someone very special. Her name is Meredith Mendelson. She's the executive director of the Ellie Fund, and her organization has done so much to reduce the barriers to breast cancer treatment that we've talked about earlier. Welcome, Meredith.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And to all the panelists, thank you for bringing such good information into this evening's presentation. I would just like to say that the Ellie Fund very much wants to help you through treatment for breast cancer. We know it's a journey. We know it is extremely tough. And we believe that we have solutions to the barriers, to the access issues that Dr. Moy shared. We don't want you to be alone. A woman should never choose between taking care of their child or treating breast cancer. And therefore, the Ellie Fund has money to help you pay for childcare if you need that. We can feed an entire family, the whole household, and not just the patient, because we know that while breast cancer does affect men and women, the majority of patients are women. And when a woman has family, has children, has older parents or siblings living in their household, the first thing they think about are the other people in the household, and they do not put themselves first. So our mission is to reduce financial stress, emotional stress, so that if you are faced with a breast cancer diagnosis, you are not alone. The Ellie Fund has been here for 25 years. We have never turned a patient away. We do not ask if you need help. We don't ask for your tax returns. We don't ask you to prove that you need help. If you are being treated for breast cancer, you need something. And what every woman needs is different. And we can customize a grant for you totally free of charge. And we will stay with you for 3 months during curative treatment. Or if there is someone with stage 4 cancer, we can stay with you for 6 months. So the way to reach us is by either reaching out to the Ellie Fund on the website is below. There is an information box right when you log in, that's right when you see the website, that says, are you a patient? Do you need help? So you can write to us directly and we will turn help around sometimes within 72 hours, because we know that transportation is really a barrier for women in Boston. And if you can't get to treatment safely and on time, you may choose not to go. And that is totally unacceptable. And we will put you in an Uber or a taxi or pay for the ride, whatever it is that you need, and we will stay with you. So it's an honor to serve the men and women of Boston. And we believe we really can lighten the emotional and financial stress. And we want to help you.
Thank you so much, Meredith, for joining us as well. And we hope that folks reach out. Again, it's Meredith Mendelson from the Ellie Fund. And if you weren't looking at the screen, or if you're driving for whatever reason, it's www.elliefund, ELLIE, fund.org. Thank you, Meredith.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Have a good night. We are going to move right along with Dr. Alicia Sequist.
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you to those in the audience for being here. It is a real pleasure for all of us to get to talk to the community. We sit in our offices every day and talk with individual patients, but I think it's to hear the message of the of what we have to say, especially about cancer screening. We really have to get up to the population who's not sitting in our clinic, or who might know a mom or a dad or a grandma or a cousin who can benefit from cancer screening. So we really are relying on you guys to help us spread the word. And I want to talk to you about lung cancer screening. It's one of the newer screening tests, and it's something that not everyone is even aware exists. If we can put the slide up. Lung cancer is, I think, as Dr. Lee showed on one of the slides, it's the leading cause of cancer death in the world. It's the leading cause of cancer death in the U.S. And it's the leading cause of cancer death in Boston. So it's a really big problem, unfortunately. And it also suffers from this bad reputation of being something that has no good outcome, that's a death sentence, and people don't want to know if they have it. But things have changed so much. Lung cancer, if it's caught early, can be cured, and the treatments have improved dramatically over the last 5 to 10 years. So it is something that you want to find out that you have. If you have it, you want to find that out early. Lung cancer, the biggest risk factor for lung cancer is smoking, although that's not the only risk factor. And we're seeing an increase in lung cancer among people who never smoked, or who smoked decades ago and quit in the 1980s or the 1990s. But the screening test that we have, this low-dose CAT scan that looks at the lungs, it is primarily available right now for smokers or for people who recently quit within the last 15 years. We do know, when we think about racial differences, that Black people who have smoked in the past have a higher rate of lung cancer than white people who have smoked. And so it's almost more important to know about screening in communities of color. The low-dose CT scan is a really easy test. It only takes about 5 to 10 minutes. You don't have to have any IV placed or there's no prep that you have to do at home. It is one of the most effective cancer screening tests that we have in terms of how many lives can be saved compared to how many people have to be screened. But unfortunately, we as a healthcare system are doing a really poor job of getting it out to the public who needs to be screened. And that's true not only in Boston or Massachusetts, but across the country. What is interesting is that realizing how poorly the country as a whole has done on lung cancer screening, just this year, the recommendations for who to screen have been updated. And that update was done with a focus on Black patients because of the increased risk of cancer with even lower smoking exposure. And so you can see the bar graph on the right bottom corner talks about, compared to the old screening criteria, the new criteria, who's expected to benefit from that change. And the first two bars are men and women. So women are expected to benefit even more than men from this updated entry criteria. And then when we look by race, Black and Latinx patients are expected to benefit hugely compared to white patients. The older screening criteria were more geared to the demographics of white patients who get lung cancer. And now the age limit has been lowered and the smoking history has also been lowered. And that's really going to benefit our communities of color in a more dramatic fashion. So the new criteria to access this really easy, really effective screening test for lung cancer are that the person has to be 50 years of age, have smoked the equivalent of 1 pack of cigarettes a day for about 20 years or more, and is still smoking or quit more recently within the last 15 years. And then, Brenda, do we think that the sound is working? We can try and play a video, but if you can't hear it, we can stop it.
I think the sound checked out at 6 p.m. for us, so the video probably won't be possible tonight. But
it won't be possible, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem. So the video was just a little cartoon showing how easy it is to go in and get lung cancer screening and what happens, which is essentially that you lie on a table that moves through this big donut. So it's not a tight space. It takes about 2 minutes to do the scan. So it's not a long time. And for people who have claustrophobia, it's usually not something that bothers claustrophobia. And then that's it. And it's done once a year. It is a screening program, so it is something you should have done once a year to follow along. And there are lots of hospitals all throughout Boston that offer it. So we hope that if screening for lung cancer is appropriate, that you or your loved ones go out and get screened. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Leisha. We have one more MD to add to our screen here, and her name is Dr. Aparna Parikh. She is joining us now. Hi, Aparna.
Hi, how are you?
Great. So you are up. You can introduce yourself, and then we'll go right into your slide on colon cancer.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you. Sorry for being late. I was jumping in from another webinar, but I'm Aparna Parikh. I'm one of the gastrointestinal oncologists at MGH and specialize mainly in colon cancer. And that's what I'm here to talk to you a little bit about today. All right. I think my slide is pulling up. So, colon cancer is, in the top 3 cancers for men and women. It is increasingly leading to ultimately be the second cause of mortality for both men and women in the United States. And what we're seeing actually overall is a huge rise in colon cancer in younger patients. So a 2 to 3% actually increase every year. But like we're seeing for other cancers that the panelists have talked about today, we know there's a stark disparity in colorectal cancer, not only in screening, but also in mortality. So we know that colorectal cancer screening is lower in African American patients. But when you look at African American patients, both who identified as male and African American patients who identified as female, African Americans had the highest number of death for colon cancer across the different ethnic groups. And I think in a context of cancer related screening, it's really important for us as a community to think about what are the barriers to screening and what are the systemic issues that are leading to not only huge gaps in screening, but also a higher mortality for these patients. Next slide, please. Great. So I thought I had one more slide, but that's okay. I think one thing that I wanted to just mention is in regards to the screening guidelines. So historically, for Black men, actually, the screening guidelines had been 45, and that was because we were seeing Black men dying at much higher rates than non-Black patients. But over the last year or so, the USPSTF, which is one of the bodies that sets governance for screening guidelines, recently recommended that all patients should be screened at 45. And with colon cancer, one thing I wanted to mention is the difference between the different screening tests. So a screening test is a test when you're not having symptoms. So for colon cancer, many patients that end up in our clinics have had some GI symptoms or blood in their stool for some time. And that, if you're having those symptoms, you're not appropriate for a screening test. You actually need to be tested for colon cancer. So a screening test is when you're not having symptoms, but you reach a certain age, and that age is 45. Then there's two different types of screening tests that are available. So one screening test is direct visualization, and that's the test that many of you may have heard about as the colonoscopy, and that's actually looking at the inside of the colon to see if there's any cancers. There's also stool-based tests, so different tests where we can actually test the stool with pretty good performance characteristics to give a sense of if you have cancer or not. If you have a positive stool-based test, then you actually have to still go get your colonoscopy. So unfortunately, it's not a replacement for a colonoscopy, but I think the take-home message here is that we know that African Americans have a high or incidence of colon cancer, have a higher number of deaths from colon cancer, and the screening for everyone is 45 now.
Thank you so much, Aparna, for sharing this information with our community. We're going to just hop right into a couple of questions that we've gathered, and any of you guys can hop in and answer. But, you know, we talk about community engagement and building trust in the community. What can you provide, either of you can comment on how institutions can build more trust and partnerships with the communities of color? As you guys just described, every single one of these cancers greatly affects the community of color. So we would like to hear what your thoughts may be on that.
Well, I think I can get started, and I certainly welcome everyone's opinions about this. I think this is a really important question because, you know, as medical institutions in the city of Boston, it is really our responsibility to be present in the community and to build a relationship so that people feel comfortable coming to us for care, to build an environment in where we are in the institutions that is welcoming, and to provide the best possible care that we can. And I'll be candid, we are very aware that in years past, our hospital has underperformed in this way. And it is our job now to build trust, and it's something that we are absolutely committed to do. This is a huge priority at the Mass General Cancer Center. We know that this is going to take many, many years of repeated presence and coming out and talking to folks, talking to you, the community members, to your doctors and nurses, to your family members, so that we can convey our sincerity. And I also think it's going to take many years of us taking really great care of the community members so that we can prove that we're deserving of this trust. But we understand that your trust is a gift and it's something that we need to earn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bev. I'm not sure if anybody else wanted to add. I have a couple of questions that I would like to add, or ask, and jump in as you see fit. I guess my next question would be, in what ways do advocacy groups help medical institutions reach the community? We know that bridges are key, and how does that bridge exist? How do they do that?
Maybe I'll just jump in for this one. First of all, I think Bev hit the nail on the head with the last answer. That's why we were all speechless. But in terms of advocacy groups, my relationship with Fen is dated back a number of years now. So that we've been trying to build a relationship together on bringing academics to the group that Fen has been building over time. What advocacy groups, as Dr. Crawford has described and illuminated, is what they can do is they can bring trusted information to these groups of folks in our various communities, trusted information about the diagnosis, the diagnostic process, screening, the treatments. And then there's the part about the clinical trials that I think was really so compelling for him to describe, because as Dr. Moy has described, we need to earn trust. When we think about clinical trials, we also, view them as being very important tools to provide new therapies, new cutting edge therapies to all of our patients. And I think that the advocates can really help patients understand what's available to them. And as a bridge to getting care at our institution, my door is always open for my colleagues at Fen to refer patients.
I also wonder, Brenda, if we might be able to invite Meredith back in from the Ellie Fund, because as an executive director of an important advocacy group, she might have something to add here.
Thank you for bringing me back. That's so nice. Amazing. I just wanted to say that if there are any patients out there that do qualify for a clinical trial, as Dr. Moy mentioned before, it frequently could be many visits a week. It adds up. Although there's no cost, to the patient to participate, there are many reasons why people can't afford to participate, like parking, transportation to the trial, who's going to watch your kids during the trial, who's going to make meals for your family when you're in the trial. And the Ellie Fund will support any breast patient who qualifies for a trial. It's part of treatment. And in some cases, clinical trials are life-saving treatment and maybe someone's last attempt to get the best possible care in the world. And we don't want any reason for you not to participate. So if you are considering a clinical trial with your oncology team, please know, especially at Mass General, we support hundreds of their patients every year. We work very, very closely with their doctors and their nurses, and we will support you financially through a clinical trial. No questions asked.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meredith.
I would like to add too, it's so wonderful to hear about these formal advocacy groups like FEN and the Ellie Fund. But advocates come in all flavors, and an individual patient that's being treated for cancer or completed cancer treatment is also a really important advocate and a huge way that doctors can bridge with the communities. I think all of us have had many personal experiences where we're treating a person for cancer, and that person opens up and shares and tells us a little bit more about the challenges they're currently facing as they're going through treatment, whether it's transportation or the different relationships with members of their families. And not only do we try to take that information and do what we can to help the person who's right in front of us, but we also, especially when we hear the same thing from multiple patients, we can start to see patterns. And as a cancer center, I think we're really dedicated to trying to, when we see patterns of obstacles that our patients are facing, to try and systematically tackle those obstacles so that the next person that gets diagnosed doesn't have to even face that obstacle. And I think that individual patients can actually have a huge impact on connecting a medical institution with the community that they're coming from.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Meredith. We're going to bring you off screen as we go right into herbal medicine, unless if you want to engage in that question. All right, I thought so. Okay, we'll keep you at the Ellie Fund. Thank you so much. So herbal medicine, you guys treat patients with cancer. What can you tell us about someone who's undergoing treatment for cancer, but also wants to continue or consider herbal medicine?
I'm happy to just jump in and say that I have patients who try lots of different things, seek out care through a variety of different providers, traditional healers, herbal medications, and those sorts of things. And I always just tell them that I just want to know what they're on. I want to know what they're on so that I can understand, is there any potential drug interaction that they haven't really considered? If they may be receiving treatment from someone else, then I'd like to just have some form of communication with that other provider, just so I can understand, whether or not this is in the patient's best interest. What's important for us is that we understand that it's a dialogue. It's in that. Part of our ability to build trust is to listen and hear, why are patients taking the supplements that they're on, or herbal supplements, those sorts of things, so we can make certain that it's safe for them. And I've usually found that having that sort of frank discussion has allowed a deeper understanding of the patient's understanding of the cancer and of their treatments.
Yeah, I can piggyback a little bit, so I'm of Indian origin, and, for example, the Ayurvedic tradition is a healthy lifestyle system that has been sort of used in India for over 5,000 years. And I think there's probably some value to some of those supplements, and there's tools to actually, that we're learning that we can actually use. I think, speaking to the advocacy question, I think what we all are cognizant of is cancer is a vulnerable time for patients, and there are people out there that can exploit that vulnerability to try to make money off of it. And so as part of that shared decision making and a ongoing dialogue, our hope is that with trust that we can engage in a dialogue and try to help figure out, what are things that may be, or places and people that may be trying to take advantage of the individual patient in front of you, but certainly don't debunk certain practices at all, and welcome a discussion around those, but recognize for all of us that have done this for some time now that there are practices and people out there that are trying to make a buck or two off of people at a very vulnerable time in their lives.
I think I would also add that, we are very aware that a big proportion of our patients are using natural medicines and are undergoing cancer treatment. And what we really want to get across is that we don't want people to think that we don't embrace all beliefs and all thoughts. If people think, oh, I don't want to go to a place like Mass General because they're not going to, support my desire to use X, Y, or Z, that is really not necessarily true. We just want to know what you're thinking and what you're thinking of using, because we want to talk about, whether we think it's okay or whether we think you should have some other thoughts about it. Like Dr. Lee said, it's an open dialogue, but it is not a reason not to come and see us for care.
Awesome. All right, we are 4 minutes away from 7:30, and that was our cutoff. And there's a lot of things that we've discussed here, but any closing remarks from you guys that you want to share with the Boston community, the community of color, any other partnering organizations that may be watching the replay or tonight?
Well, I would say that, what we really want to sincerely do is partner with you to really help us, move forward in trying to close some of those disparities that we showed earlier. We don't want to see people in Boston dying disproportionately of cancer when that shouldn't be happening. This is something that we are embracing and something that we really want to remedy. We have our own ideas, but we're sure that we don't know everything. So what we want to do is partner with members of the community and try to figure out together how we can better give cancer care. This is really the beginning of a more open dialogue. And, if folks want us to come out and talk some more, we want to be able to do that. So we really want this to be the beginning of an important relationship going forward.
Bev is always so eloquent. We never know what to say after. It was really well put. Thank you for listening to what we have to say, and I look forward to hearing more from you.
And I agree. And I think that as we move forward, we are going to try to improve our own access for patients to come and see us. But I think as we also provide information, if for some reason we can't see you at our hospital, we will do our darndest to put you into clinics where you can be seen, where we have colleagues across the city and relationships built throughout the city. We don't think, cancer is not a time for us to be competing. This is a time for us to be, taking care of you.
Yeah, I guess since everyone is coming up with closing remarks, so many things to share. But at the live event a few weeks ago, someone came up to us and brought up the question exactly to Dr. Lee's point about you're talking about screening, but what about access? It's not enough just to tell us to get screened, but what happens if we actually have a cancer? And I hope with us having these discussions that you're getting the message from all of us that we're here from you, and kind of any capacity. The oncology community in Boston is a small community. So, if it's not directly in our clinics, we can easily reach out and get you the care that you need. But I think all of us here tonight are working tirelessly with our organizations too to advocate to ensure that we can actually take care of the communities that our hospital was meant to serve.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. We all know that October 14th wouldn't be possible without the Black market. Kai and Chris Grant. Yes, it's Kai and Chris Grant. Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know of the Black market, they were established in 2017 as a nascent pop-up market with a vision to help close Boston's 247,000 wealth gap and a mission to ignite Roxbury's creative economy. Their marketplace was widely accepted as one of Boston's premier spaces to gather, meet, and shop, understanding the need for micro business funders to develop the business acumen and literacy needed to move towards sustainability. So we thank Kai Grant and her husband, Chris Grant, for their vision and the wonderful work that they're doing in Nubian Square. Also in our audioless video that you guys saw earlier with all those amazing pictures, I think there was one picture of like boxed up. There were wraps in there, and they were from Rhythm and Wraps on Commonwealth Ave in Boston, and they were delicious. So if you ever are in the area, you can head on over there, and they made our event possible by boxing up some COVID-friendly wraps. So thank you to Rhythm and Wraps as well. We are wrapped up and we are done. We thank everyone for participating, for watching, for sharing the video. If you ever want to get in contact with our MGH Cancer Center Equity Council, please feel free to send us an email at mghccdiversity@partners.org, and we look forward to partnering with some of you guys in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great night.